The boy has 9 lives, but his mother kills him every year on his birthday. I'm fucking illiterate as fuck. I can't speak.
Louis Drax has been in hundreds of accidents, but he survived them all. His own birth was an accident, and when he was only 4 months old, a lamp fell on him.
Damn,
He's been bitten
wait.
by spiders, stung by...
Holy shit. Everything happened so fast.
Since he was born, Louis Drax has been in hundreds of accidents, but he survived them all. His own birth was an accident, and when he was only 4 months old, a lamp fell on him. He's been bitten by spiders, stung by bees,
Yo.
electrocuted, and gotten food poisoning several times, not to mention a variety of diseases like meningitis. Nothing seems to kill this child.
This nigga's more than a poor kid. This
And his
nigga's
mother
been
Natalie
through
calls
the
him an angel,
hell and
although
back.
he also may be like a cat, and his 9th year may be his
I don't
last
know how
life.
he's still alive.
On Louis' 9th birthday, he, his mom and his father Peter go on a picnic near a cliff, and Louis ends up falling into the sea. He
Yo,
feels
what
cold
the
underwater,
fuck?
and a mysterious growling
How do you
voice
just have
tells
the
him that
worst
this
luck
is
in
his
the
9th
world?
life. A few moments later, Detective Dalton and her team come by thanks to the call from 2 hitchhikers that saw Natalie nearby. Mother and son are both rescued, but Peter is nowhere to be found. Louis is taken to the hospital, and Dr. Yannick does as much as he can, but unfortunately, Louis dies. However, when the body is taken to the morgue, it starts convulsing, so doctors bring it back into the emergency room. Meanwhile, Dr. Alan Pascal is giving a TED talk about his book on the subject of the brain under coma. He tells the story of how he used to sleepwalk as a child, and he's never stopped looking for that lost dimension the brain goes into. Afterward,
What the fuck
he
you
gets a
doing
call
if
from
you
Yannick,
fall off a
asking him to
cliff
come to the
and you
hospital to take over
survive?
Louis' case. He learns the
But
boy
you
was
know
dead for
that
2 hours and now he's
you're
in a
going
coma
to
with
get-
many broken bones and
Just
endangered
get
organs.
battered your
Alan
whole
also gets to
life.
meet Natalie and promises to bring Louis
Like,
back,
would you just,
calling the boy a miracle
would you
of
stay
medicine.
alive and just take
In
it,
the meantime,
pause? Or would
Louis'
you
comatose
just,
mind is exploring
just
old
end
memories
it?
to share with the
The
mysterious
GTA.
voice. Because he was a troublesome boy, Natalie was always protective of Louis, and he sent him to therapy
Like,
with
shit's
Dr.
crazy.
Perez. Louis tells Perez anything he wants because the doctor promised it would stay between them. Perez also finds Louis' rudeness amusing. Sometimes Louis refuses to answer some questions though, like the time he said he didn't think he would grow up but never explained why. When Perez wonders if Louis is causing the accidents on purpose, the boy changes the subject. Louis knows Perez hypnotizes some of his patients because he read the doctor's book, and wonders if Perez won't try on him because he's a wacko boy and not a typical disturbed child. Back in the present, Alan asks Yannick for details of the accident. The current police theory is that Peter pushed Louis, and now he's on the run, which is why they'll be posting an officer at the hospital reception. Alan talks to Louis whenever he can, telling him it's safe to come back. Dalton comes by later to talk to the doctors and shares what she's learned about Louis so far. He used to go to therapy, was disruptive at school, had no friends, and didn't fit in, thus the other boys called him Wacko Boy. Alan points out Louis' history of accidents, and Dalton
Makes
explains
sense.
the previous doctors think the boy did it on purpose to get attention, but neither she nor Alan believes it because the accident started when
I
he was a
mean,
baby. Alan
I
also
don't even
wonders if
expect him
Peter
to
was
have friends. I
violent,
wouldn't be
but
his friend
Dalton doesn't
either.
comment on that. Afterward, Alan goes for a walk with Natalie to try to offer some comforting
The fuck?
words.
I don't want to die.
In Louis'
I
mind,
feel like that's like a
memories are
curse you
flashing
can pass
quickly,
on.
from happy moments
Like it's a
Natalie
disease or
taking
some
care of
shit.
him
You be
and
his
the family's
friend?
visit
I
to the
feel like I
aquarium,
couldn't.
to worrisome moments like Natalie and
couldn't,
Peter
bro.
arguing and
I
Alan
feel like
spending
I
a
would-
lot of
oh
time
my
with Natalie in the
God.
hospital whenever she comes by to visit her son. One evening, the mysterious voice reveals
I'd be
itself,
too scared.
showing a big seaweed
And then what if
monster
my friend,
that wants to keep
just
hearing Louis' story.
dies randomly?
This next anecdote is about the time Peter took him to Sea World, and they accidentally bumped into Peter's ex-wife
Oh,
Caitlin, who had
type
remarried and now
shit.
had
Okay, I
3
feel
kids.
you.
Later, Peter asked Louis not to tell Natalie about this meeting because she was very fragile.
I feel you.
Louis promised he wouldn't, yet as soon as they returned home, Louis spilled the beans, causing an argument between his parents that he tried to
I'd be
ignore.
always scared in the
The
back of
next
my
time
mind,
he went to
even if I
therapy,
would.
Louis told Perez he didn't keep the secret because he knew his parents didn't love each other but they won't get divorced because of him. He also knew that Peter wasn't his real dad. Later, Louis asked Peter why he quit boxing. So Peter explained
Yeah.
he did it because
Yeah, oh
Natalie
yeah.
asked him to and because he became a dad.
What?
Some
I
days later,
text bro.
Alan and his wife Sophie
I
attend
text
a
bro
party
whenever he
thrown by
needed
Yannick.
it.
Alan's surprised to see Natalie is
Yeah,
there
I'll
as
make
well
sure
and he
this
can't
is
keep his eyes off her.
real
This is
quick.
noticed by Sophie, who already thinks her marriage isn't doing so well. When Alan finally gets to chat with Natalie, Sophie interrupts them, creating a very tense mood that persists when they go home. The next day, Natalie brings Louis Hamster to the hospital,
What
hoping it
in
can
the-
connect with her son. Usually animals aren't
yeah,
allowed, but
okay,
Alan
never
decides to
mind.
make an exception for her.
That makes
Natalie
sense.
says Louis loves his pet, but the truth is, this is his 3rd hamster, and he killed the previous 2.
Damn.
When Perez asked him about it, Louis told him about a secret rule that said that if you owned a small creature and it lived longer than 2 years, you were allowed to kill it because you were its owner. Perez was shocked to hear this and wanted to know where Louis learned it, trying to get him to talk about Peter. At the end of the session, Perez expressed his worries to Natalie, who got offended by Perez's insinuations and decided not to send Peter to therapy anymore. As punishment for sharing stuff that Perez had sworn wouldn't leave the room, Louis sent him a letter filled with hamster droppings. This story is being heard by the seaweed monster in the present, and he wonders why Louis hates men so much. The boy replies that men did bad things to his mom. Meanwhile, Alan asks Natalie why she had ended therapy with Perez shortly before the cliff incident. Natalie explains she used to think Perez was trying to turn her against her husband, and now she's starting to see maybe he had been right. Since Alan's very understanding, Natalie shares what happened on Louis' birthday. She and Peter had gotten into an argument because Peter didn't like the fact she had ended Louis' therapy. Peter got aggressive and that scared Louis, who ran away to the edge. His parents went after him and tried to grab him, but in the struggle, Louis fell. Alan asks if Peter had been violent before, but Natalie ignores the question and tells him she's known Peter since she was 18, making him the only man she's ever been with. Alan thinks Natalie deserves better and the two of them end up kissing, which can be seen from the hospital windows. This includes the room with Louis, who suddenly sits up and watches him with a red eye. Alan and the nurse rush to check on Louis, who is trying to say something. Sadly, he only gets to whisper "my dad" before Natalie hugs him and he falls back into his coma. Louis revisits another memory then, the night his parents separated. Peter came to say goodbye because he was going to leave with Grandma for a while to give Natalie some space, but he promised he would always be there for his son. In the meantime, Alan stays up late running some tests to try to understand what happened, to no avail. He continues to talk to Louis, and tonight he even reads his favorite book to him. Suddenly, Alan hears a noise and finds a trail of seaweed, spiders, and mud that he follows into a room where the seaweed monster is hiding. Before he can do anything about it though, Alan sees Louis and wakes up next to him. It had been just a dream. Some days later, Alan hangs out with Yannick, who notices he's tired. Alan confesses he hasn't been sleeping well and that things with Sophie are worse than ever. Yannick wonders if Alan's been getting together with Natalie because everyone in the hospital knows about the kiss in the garden.
Oh God,
Their
he
little
is.
chat is interrupted by a call from Natalie, who asks for Alan's help because she thinks Peter had been in the house. When Alan gets there, Natalie shows him a letter she found in the mailbox written in childish handwriting and signed by Louis. The text itself is alarming as well. Louis warns Natalie that she should stay away from Alan because he's interested in her and men always hurt her. If she doesn't listen, bad things will happen. Alan makes Natalie take the letter to the police, and an analysis by an expert reveals that whoever wrote this wasn't using their dominant hand, probably to hide their identity. Dalton advises Natalie not to stay in her house for now,
I never thought
and
about
since she doesn't have family or friends, Alan offers her a room in the hospital. Before they leave, Dalton also advises Alan not to get together with Natalie for his own safety. The next day, Alan visits Perez, who is now working in a mental hospital. Perez confesses he used to think Louis caused the accidents on purpose for attention, but the pieces didn't always fit. He shows Alan the letter with the hamster droppings, which also includes a message about how much Louis hates Perez for betraying his secrets. In return, Alan shows Perez a copy of the letter, and Perez confirms the letter follows Louis' particular way of speaking to a T. Meanwhile, Louis revisits the memory of the day of the incident. Peter came back just to celebrate his son's birthday and brought him the third hamster as a present. In the car, Peter told Natalie that he wanted to have Louis for his 2 weeks break. Natalie didn't like the idea but had no arguments to refuse. Then she accused Peter of being lost. He denied this, and a short calm argument ensues that ended with Louis getting the map to help his dad. However, instead of seeing common roads on the paper, he finds a map of his own brain. Later in the evening, Sophie shows up at Alan's office. Since he's barely home anymore, she's brought a mysterious letter written in the same handwriting as the one Natalie got.
never mind.
Sophie had already opened it, and the contents upset her so much that she leaves without a word. This letter is also signed by Louis, and it asks Alan to leave his mother alone. Dalton comes over to investigate and Alan confirms it's impossible for Louis to have written the letters. The sitting up had just been a muscle spasm. As new theories appear in Dalton's mind, she asks Alan for Natalie's version of what happened during the picnic. Then she confesses that Peter isn't Louis' real father and that Natalie had put Louis up for adoption when he was a baby. After the cops leave, Alan confronts Natalie, asking why she had lied about having been with only one guy. Natalie explains Louis' conception hadn't been consensual, and his birth almost killed them both. Since then she's felt like she's been surrounded by predators, but Alan promises she's safe with him, and the two of them take the next step in their relationship. Back to Louis' memory of the picnic, Peter had indeed been angry about Natalie ending Louis' therapy, but he cut the argument short for the sake of his son. At the same time, Natalie is in the present talking to him, telling the story of how she and Peter got together. It was after one of baby Louis' big accidents. She had called Peter to ask for his support while waiting on the operation results. The doctors thought he was her husband, and a year later, they did get married, because Peter hadn't really loved Caitlin and liked Natalie more.
A year later?
Louis Mine sees her
That's
and hates how
fucking
much she
early.
rambles, so the seaweed monster
I
takes
can
him away
imagine
to
getting
finally show
married.
him the truth. In the meantime,
Not right
the
now.
cops are making every member of the
Especially
hospital
after a
staff
year
write
knowing
something to
somebody, that's
compare the
crazy.
handwriting with the letters. At that moment, a commotion could be heard from Louis' room. Peter's mother Violet has come to see her grandson, but she and Natalie
Okay,
hate each other
Emil.
and now are arguing. Alan takes Violet to his office and learns that since Peter disappeared, Natalie has been trying to stop Violet from seeing Louis. Peter hasn't been in contact with his mother, but Violet's sure he didn't do anything because he loved that kid more than himself. In fact, Louis is the only reason why Peter stayed with Natalie for so long. Violet liked Caitlin better and thinks Natalie took Peter away with lies and manipulation. She also thinks Natalie is lying to Alan about her lack of family and the fact Louis' conception had been forced.
That's what I'm
Their
saying, bro.
conversation is
Personally,
suddenly
me
interrupted by
personally,
Dalton,
I'm
who brings bad news. They found Peter's body inside a cave
I'm
near the
throwing
cliff.
them. That's what I'm
Back in
saying.
Louis' mind, the seaweed monster makes the kid jump with him into the
Even
water,
if I'm
and they swim
still
until they
me
reach a
and not
dark
her,
cave.
I'm still.
Here Louis discovers that the
I'm
monster
not
is his
going.
own
I'm not going for that
manifestation of
either.
Peter,
I
who
don't know
tells
how
him
she
the
just
real
let that
version of the
slide.
events. He had loved Caitlin the most,
Shit would've went
but he
down.
felt bad for Natalie, who was always sad. Natalie needed him the most, so Peter divorced Caitlin and married her. He learned too late that Natalie always cried because it made people feel sorry for her, which she enjoyed more than laughing. The only reason why he didn't leave was Louis, who he loved more than himself. Peter never thought Louis was weird, in fact he's always been proud of him. Meanwhile in the morgue, the
What?
seaweed-covered body of Peter is going through an autopsy.
What?
It's already decomposed a lot, which indicates Peter's been dead for days. He fell into the water together with Louis, but the water current dragged him into the cave and that's why he had been so hard to find. The cops also receive a message from the lab saying Peter didn't write the letters, which isn't really surprising at this point. At the
Yeah.
hospital,
So who were
Alan
the
wakes up
letters
after
then?
accidentally oversleeping, and the nurse confesses she hadn't dared to wake him up because he had been sleepwalking. Apparently, he went to the desk, wrote a prescription, then threw it in the trash before returning to his chair. The nurses kept the prescription and when Alan takes a look at it, he's shocked to see the handwriting from the letters, prescribing Natalie dangerous doses of insulin and chloroform.
What the fuck?
Alan goes to the police and together they confirm the nurse's story through the security cameras. He thinks Louis is controlling his mind while he sleeps and he's trying to tell them something. Dalton thinks it's a crazy theory and while the handwriting
Yo,
does match
imagine
the
somebody
letters,
that's in your body just controlling you. That's weird. Especially being another grown man controlling another grown man.
Alan is still not a
That's
suspect.
crazy.
He hadn't known the family before they came to the hospital and the fact both Louis and Peter had fallen that day can't be a coincidence.
Like, you can't be
Seeing
that
where this is
fucking
going,
bored to be
Alan
doing all
visits
that
Perez
shit.
to ask if he ever thought
You
Natalie
too
was
fucking
involved in
old
the
to be
accident.
doing that shit.
Perez also thinks Alan's theory is crazy, but he accepts to hypnotize him to confirm it. At the hospital, Perez guides Alan through the hypnosis and helps
Wait,
him find a
Louis is a
beach-like mind space
kid.
where Louis is staying. Perez requests to
Wait,
speak to Louis, and Alan replies
bro.
using the boy's speech patterns. Using Alan as his vessel, Louis finally finishes revealing what happened at the picnic. He had blown the candles, and wished for Peter to be his real dad so he would stay. Afterward, Natalie tried to give Louis some candy, but she wouldn't share with Peter. In fact, she got upset that he would even try and falsely accused Peter of being drunk.
Yeah,
Peter got
Louis is a
suspicious about the
boy.
contents of the candy and became aggressive only to take the jar from her. That's when Louis ran away in fear, and Peter went after him to move him away from the edge before accusing Natalie of wanting to hurt their son, causing her to push him to shut him up. Then, Natalie turned to Louis, thus he did as she always wanted him to do and jumped into the water. The truth is, Natalie has always been the one causing Louis accidents on purpose. Once the tale ends, Alan wakes up at the same time Louis' heart stops, but Alan brings him back with a defibrillator. Sometime later, Alan is moving to his own apartment because he's separated from Sophie. Afterward, he goes to Perez's mental hospital, where Natalie has been admitted because she has Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This means she's a caregiver that creates problems in another person to get attention from doctors and friends. In the beginning, Natalie was hurting
That's
Louis
fucking
directly, but as he grew up,
insane.
Louis learned what she wanted and got in accidents on his own in exchange for her love. Currently, Natalie is responding well to treatment, but she's also pregnant with Alan's child. Violet is now in charge of Louis' care. In his mind space, the boy wonders if being in a coma
What
really
the
is bad,
fuck?
considering he can stay with his dad and never get in trouble. However, Peter disagrees, explaining all the magic and possibilities waiting for him to wake up. Louis remembers the day Peter left, promising he would always be with him, and he opens his eyes. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can, and he opens mind space so pregnant with Alan's child. Violet is now in charge of Louis' care. In his mind space, the boy wonders if being in a coma really is bad, considering he can stay with his dad and never get in trouble. However, Peter disagrees, explaining all the magic and possibilities waiting for him to wake up. Louis remembers the day Peter left, promising he would always be with him, and he opens his eyes. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.
It's crazy that you actually did predict that you did predict that that the dude's gonna be the dad. I'm not gonna lie. That's kind of crazy. There's a lot of twists at the end. That shit was good though.